going through the SBA, but going through banks with the SBA imprimatur, which makes this all go much faster. For our students, we paused payments for federal student loan borrowers, paused the payments, and suspended wage garnishment and negative credit reporting during this time. For that and for so many other things relating to our students, I thank Bobby Scott, our chairman of Education and Workforce and Labor. And for our veterans, you heard earlier all of these chairmen make these presentations. For our veterans, we secured nearly $20 billion in funding to improve VA's readiness with equipment, tests, and additional care as again, 571 veterans and 85 employees have now tested positive, and I thank Chairman Takano and others on the committee for their leadership. For our homeowners, renters, and homeless creditors, again, I thank and consumers, I thank Chairwoman Waters for her leadership there. Since the beginning of this crisis, we have fought to ensure that our nation's response puts families first as we go through this. So the first two bills that we worked in a bipartisan way on were about addressing the emergency. The first bill was about testing to ensure that everyone in the country would have access to free testing. Among other things, it had in there issues that relate to research for a vaccine, research for a cure, but many other things addressing the emergency. In the second bill, which also focused on the emergency, we have mask, and many other provisions focused on the emergency, but taking us to this bill today, which is about mitigation. As our distinguished Mr. DeFazio would say, first we had emergency, then we have mitigation. Doesn't mean we're finished with emergency, but it's moving on to mitigating for some of the economic and health damage caused by this pandemic. Next, we will move to recovery, and hopefully that will be soon. Always, though, addressing the emergency and the mitigation needed. How are we coming, Mr. Leaders? How are we coming with our gallery? As we have all said universally, and we say it almost all the time that we come to the floor, no bill is perfect. No bill is perfect. But we want to make sure that at least comes near part of the way to being sufficient. I do think that we should, when we're considering a bill, appreciate for what is in the bill rather than judge it for what is not in the bill. But we do know that we must do more. There's been a constant communication among all of our members, I'm sure on both sides of the aisle, when you're at home or here, with doctors, healthcare providers, laborers, small businesses, nonprofits, faith groups, and scientists on the daily needs and developments in your communities. The on-the-ground reports and clear-eyed thinking we have are essential to crafting our approach to all of this. So again, listening to members on both sides of the aisle and your comments here today, as well as the input that you have been giving in the legislative process, we know that this cannot be our final bill. Yet this bill, again, is I think Bobby Scott called it a down payment. We must advance a fourth bill to address the continued needs. For our fight against the coronavirus, our state and local governments will need vastly more support for preventing, preparing for, and responding to the crisis. Our hospitals and health systems still need vast infusions of funding so they can treat those in need. We must do more. For our healthcare workers, and this has been a current theme on both sides of the aisle, our gratitude for our healthcare workers. They are our heroes. We're thankful and grateful to them. We pray for them. But we need to do more for them than just to say those words. Our frontline healthcare workers, and whether emergency needs, our firefighters, our law enforcement, face a dire lack of medical and personal protective equipment. PPE, personal protective equipment. That's the reference that when you see PPE, that's what it is. We must ensure that the President uses the Defense Production Act to its full extent to provide the tools that we need to combat this crisis. All workers are risking their lives on the front lines of this fight and need stronger OSHA protections to keep them safe. Thank you, Mr. Scott. This week, for example, and you probably all have examples. This week, we learned of the tragic death of Caius Kelly, a nurse manager in New York who died in the line of duty from coronavirus. He and his fellow nurses risked their lives without proper protective equipment because the hospital supply simply did not have enough. Nurses were given a single plastic protective gown to use for an entire shift, when protocol called for a change of gowns between interactions with patients. Other nurses were forced to resort to tying bandanas over their faces in place of proper equipment. And still others even began tying plastic garbage bags around disposable scrubs that they were given in place of proper scrubs for extra protection. As Mr. Kelly's sister said, his death could have been prevented. I'm angry. He was healthy. And now our nurses, doctors, healthcare workers, and first responders need action. We have to make sure they know that help is not only on the way, but it is a priority for all of us. These people risk their lives trying to save other people's lives, and then they take home what they interacted with in an infected environment, take home. This is just asking far too much. Our families, our workers, our retirees still need more money in their pockets to protect their income security with increased SNAP. One thing we couldn't get in the bill was the 15% increase in food stamps for our children, for our seniors, for those who qualify. Bigger direct payments. I hope that we'll be in agreement. I know that Richie and Maxine had the idea of ongoing direct payments, so bigger direct payments. Pension protections. We had a protection in the legislation. It was supported by everyone. The President of the United States supported it, but Senator McConnell said he would save it for the next bill. So that's why I'm mentioning it, for the next bill. And then we need more expanded family and medical leave. Let me give you an example. Come on, my colleagues, to the gallery. Let me give you an example. If your parent is sick but had ongoing caregiver in the home or went to a senior health center on a daily basis, and because of the virus, that caregiver couldn't come or that health center was closed, you would be able to take family and medical leave. However, as in the case of many members here, if your mom or your dad are healthy and they contract the coronavirus, you would not be able to take family and medical leave. What we would like that to say is for those who cannot care for themselves, it just doesn't make any sense in my view. So in any case, we need that, and without exception. And all Americans need free coronavirus treatment so they don't have to fear the high cost of a hospital stay and others. When we said that the tests were free, it didn't mean that the test is free, but your visit to the doctor is not. And so in the days and weeks to come, Democrats will continue to advance legislation to meet the urgent needs of all affected by the coronavirus. And I keep saying the coronavirus because in this bill, people say, well, how come we didn't do this or that? Because this is specific to the coronavirus challenge that we have. I just want to say a word about our children as I close. So many of our children, I want them, if they're paying attention, distinguished Congresswoman Brooks mentioned the children. We're so sad for them that they cannot be fully engaged in school as they were. Some have access to remote learning and the rest. And this has had a deep impact on American life as it affects our children as well. When I I see that some graduations have been canceled, and hopefully not so many more if we can get through this. And and I've been, as a mother of 5, grandmother of 9, personally, but officially in my leadership role, I have seen hundreds of thousands of graduates. And what's exciting about it personally and officially is to see the excitement of the families when their child graduates. But when that family happens to have someone on the stage who is the first in the family to graduate, the pride, the joy, the patriotism, all of it is so exuberant, and many of them will be deprived of that experience of seeing that child walk across the stage. So let's try to get this. We had the best minds working 24/7, all hands on deck to find a cure. Let's make sure that we give them the resources they need to do so, but at the same time that we obey the science that says shelter in place or whatever it happens to be. So as we go forward, let us pray. Let us remember what His Holiness told us. What he told us was that we have a responsibility for the common good. So let us prepare for all the loved ones who have lost family members and others who are struggling with the illness now. Let's pray for our heroic healthcare workers and first responders who are risking their lives to care for the sick every day, the men and women in our factories making more medical supplies and personal protective equipment, the farmers, producers, and grocery workers keeping food on the shelves, our truck drivers, postal workers, everybody who is contributing to the effort, and the scientists, as I say, all hands on deck 24/7 for a solution. Congress must show the same courage, same resilience, same strength, and with a great unity and urgency to put families and workers first. Let me again thank everyone who had anything to do with this, and that means almost everybody in this room. Let me thank the Senate Democrats and Leader Schumer for his work, as you acknowledge Leader McConnell. And let us again return to the words of His Holiness Pope Francis. May we enlighten those responsible for the common good so that they may know now to care for those entrusted to their responsibility. With that, I hope we have the biggest possible vote for the American people to show them that Congress's heart and the country's heart is full of love for the American people. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields. The gentleman from Maryland reserves, and the gentleman from Texas is recognized. Gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have no other speakers and prepared to close.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you. I yield myself as much time as I may consume. Thank you,
Gentleman
Leader McCarthy, for your strong and relentless leadership. Thank you for allowing each of us to bring to the table the pro-growth policies that brought about the strongest economy on the planet as we headed into this challenge. Thank you to our House leaders, to our ranking members and all the key committees, Representative Grangers and Fox, Representatives Walden, McHenry, Cole, and Javits, to each of the members here today who have engaged in this historic agreement, and to the professional teams who have backed us every moment, night and day, in this endeavor. I want to thank our Democratic colleagues for working with us on this bipartisan bill, to our Republican colleagues in the Senate. I especially want to thank Secretary Mnuchin, the point man for President Trump on these negotiations, as well as all of the cabinet, the White House economic team. And I especially want to thank President Trump for his strong and results-oriented leadership at a time of unprecedented crisis for this great country. In times of challenge, I lean on this proverb: fear knocked, faith answered, no one was there. Coronavirus has knocked at America's door, and with it, fear. Faith is answering. We answer with faith in ourselves and our abilities, faith in our free enterprise system, faith in our amazing healthcare system, and yes, faith that when the chips are down, Congress can come together with our president to help hardworking families and businesses when they need it most. We answer that door at this crucial moment with faith in our Creator and faith in our great American spirit. This is the challenge of a lifetime. But if we keep pulling together, if we pass this bill today without delay, we take another step toward that day when we answer the door and fear is no longer there. On behalf of President Trump and the Republican Congress, we urge support for this bill, and I yield back.
Gentleman from Texas yields back the balance of his time. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, as has been said so many times on this floor, America has faced many threats, some in the nature of attack by enemies, some in the nature of natural disasters, whether they be hurricanes or tornadoes or floods. And Americans have responded and overcome those threats. We now have a threat, as some have mentioned, that is unseen, but has a great effect, and is having a great effect today as we debate this bill in America. And today we will vote not as Democrats or Republicans, but we will vote as Americans who've been sent here to represent our country and our people, to promote the general welfare. Certainly the general welfare has been put at risk by this virus. We have, in a very short time, passed 3 major pieces of legislation, 2 that generated in this House, 1 generated in the Senate. And we will pass this bill today. I want to thank the majority leader. Excuse me, the minority leader. I'm the majority leader, right? You can't have it. And while we enjoy a little levity, we understand the gravity of this situation. People will die today as a result of this virus. And we have come together as Democrats and Republicans from every region of this country to respond in a way sufficient for the challenge. And we know we'll need to do more. But this day, let us hope that, like the United States Senate, we come together, each and every one of us, not for partisan advantage, but for the advantage and defense of our people. America has been blessed by God and by our people. Let us respond this hour to their need in their defense so that America will go forward stronger and better and more ready to face future challenges. Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. All time for debate has expired. Pursuant to House Resolution 911, the previous question is ordered on the motion. The question is on adoption of the motion. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker.
For what purposes, gentlemen, seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I came here to make sure our republic doesn't die by unanimous consent in an empty chamber, and I request a recorded vote.
A recorded vote is requested. Those favoring a recorded vote will rise and remain standing until counted. An insufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is refused.
Mr. Speaker.
Is the gentleman recognized?
I object on the basis that a quorum is not present and make a point of order that a quorum is not present.
The chair will count for a quorum. Counted for a quorum is present. The motion is adopted. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. Pursuant to Section 7B of House Resolution 891, the House stands adjourned until 3 p.m. on Tuesday, March 31st, 2020.